Are you ready to enjoy no income taxes? I certainly am, and Trump just released a new statement doubling down on eliminating income tax for anyone earning under $200,000 per year. But is this actually realistic? In this video, we will take a look. Hey financial warriors, welcome to the show. On this channel, I cover US credit cards and personal finance. If you like the sound of that, do subscribe, but let's get into the video. And we're not advocating for any political side here. I'm just trying to look at the facts. So recently we had statements from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick stating that Trump wants to take everyone earning under $150,000 per year out of income tax. And we've reported on this one before, but let's play that clip.
I know what his goal is. No tax for anybody who makes less than $150,000 a year.
But then on Saturday, Trump doubled down on cutting most Americans out of tax with a post on Truth Social. When tariffs cut in, many people's income taxes will be substantially reduced, maybe even completely eliminated. Focus will be on people making less than $200,000 a year. Also, massive numbers of jobs are already being created, with new plants and factories currently being built or planned. It will be a bonanza for America. The External Revenue Service is happening. Hey, a bonanza. Now, he just raised the bar to $200,000, but what I think they might be doing here is raising their ask so that when it comes to creating the tax bill that cuts everyone's taxes, congressmen and senators can accept it, all right? So right now I'm guessing congressmen, senators, they won't vote for everyone earning under $200,000 a year being taken out of tax. They may not even vote for everyone earning under $150,000 a year to be taken out of tax. But they perhaps would vote for maybe the standard deduction to go from $15,000, which is what it is this year, 2025, up to maybe $50,000, and thus for married joint filers up to $100,000, okay, on their standard deduction. Congressmen and senators, they might think that they've dodged a bullet with that, okay, because it's less than what Trump and Lutnick had been proposing. But actually, that's perhaps what Trump and Lutnick were shooting for in the first place, okay? It's a negotiating tactic. You raise your ask so high that when the other side negotiates you back down halfway, they think they got a good deal, but it's actually way more than they wanted, the other side wanted in the first place. For example, in a business deal, let's say the other side wants to give you 10%, but you say, I want 50% of the deal, and they negotiate you back down to 30%. They feel that they got a good deal, but it's still triple their original 10% that they wanted to give you. I wouldn't be surprised if this is what they're doing. But let's now look at some research and ask, is it actually realistic for tariffs to replace taxes anyway? There is a study by the Council of Foreign Relations on whether tariff revenue could replace tax revenue from the bottom 90% of Americans. In their study, although they are highly critical of Trump's tariff policies, they actually do show that tariff revenue could be close to covering income tax revenue of the bottom 90%, which is households earning under $169,000 a year. I want to read out how they calculate this. As shown in the figure above, that's the bar chart above, annual tariff revenue from the current effective Trump tariff rate of 28% would, assuming that imports stayed constant, amount to $838 billion more than that collected in 2024 under Joe Biden. But the constant imports assumption is clearly ludicrous, as imports are bound to shift away from China. We therefore calculate the post-substitution additional tariff revenue after the shift at only $511 billion. This figure falls $65 billion short of 2024 estimates of income tax revenue garnered from the bottom 90% of US earners, those earning under $169,000 a year. I love how they use the word ludicrous to describe it. I mean, it's not really a professional sounding word to use in some official report, but anyway. So if imports stay the same, it would be $838 billion more in tariff revenue than under Biden, but realistically they won't stay the same, okay, because trade's gonna shift away from China because that's the country that has the highest tariffs by far, okay, 145% or whatever it is. So you're going to have, like iPhone production shifting to India, which has a way lower tariff. You're going to have some companies moving stuff back here. So you're going to have more domestic production, which has no tariff. So the average tariff is actually going to be lower than the 28% that it currently is. So they have estimated that in the end, tariff revenue would be $511 billion per year, and that actually almost covers tax revenue from people earning $169,000 a year and under. And if you lowered that down to $150,000 per year, it might actually be enough to cover it. And if you lowered it even further, just down to, say, increasing the standard deduction to $50,000 for single filers and $100,000 for joint filers. So that would mean no tax on your first $50,000 for a single filer, no tax on your first $100,000 for a joint filer. That's already a massive tax break. If you lowered it down to that level, it might actually cover it. Now, obviously, even if it is $50,000 single filer, $100,000 joint filer, people have other credits and deductions, okay, like child tax credit, which is $2,000 per kid, and other deductions like for energy efficient home upgrades or a home office or whatever. So the average tax-free amount may be higher. But even if it was, say, $70,000 for single filers, $120,000 for joint filers, it looks like the tariff revenue will still actually cover that. But I want to read you out one more section of this report by the Council on Foreign Relations, which really puts a downer on the whole thing, okay? Because they point out other negative factors that could come into play because of tariffs. Trump's tariffs, however, are likely to significantly dent income tax receipts from corporations, employers, and higher earners. If the IMF is right in lowering its 2025 growth forecast from 2.7% in January to 1.8% this week based on Trump's tariff orders, we calculate that income tax receipts from corporations, employers, and the top 10% of earners will be $62 billion lower than they would otherwise have been. This means that Trump's tariff revenue will actually fall a massive $127 billion short of covering those lost tax receipts, plus the tax that would have been paid by the bottom 90% in the absence of the new tariffs. So the gist of that is, yes, tariffs would bring in more revenue, but this policy would tank the economy in other ways, according to forecasts from the IMF. In my opinion, this is a bit up in the air. I don't necessarily think it will play out like that, since sometimes these predictions are politically motivated. The world is used to a certain system using income tax to fund governments, and when someone upsets the status quo, the establishment fights back. Remember the whole Paul Krugman "markets will never recover" article in the New York Times from just before Trump won the 2016 election. He writes, "Still, I guess people want an answer. If the question is, when will markets recover, a first-pass answer is never." Yeah, that statement aged like milk. Markets immediately rebounded. What investors like is certainty. So even if people had different opinions on Trump's policies, maybe a lot of people and a lot of companies didn't like them, but once you have a clear winner of the election, the path is set, okay? They will adjust their strategy and reinvest into the sectors of the market that they see benefiting under Trump, okay? Krugman definitely knows that. He is an economist after all. He probably was just pretty sure Hillary would win, or someone twisted his arm into writing that piece. Listen to Warren Buffett talking about the same thing in 2016.
Stock market will be and higher 10, 20, 30 years from now. And it would have been with Hillary, and it would have been and will be with Trump.
So all of these predictions that the market was going to tank under President Trump?
They're silly.
Silly.
They're silly.
But going back to that IMF prediction, I think it's good to acknowledge that there is some risk. Personally, I would guess that there would be lower GDP growth in 2025. So their prediction may actually be correct for 2025 and 2025 only. But then after that, once trade deals are signed in the second half of 2025 and certainly coming into 2026, I predict an economic boom as everyone gets behind the policy. Like, even if you don't like it, you will get behind it, since that's how you make money, right? Companies will take steps to make money under these circumstances, like moving factories back to the US, and that creates jobs, raises the market, creates wealth in 2026. And realistically, the 2026 tax year would actually be the first year that this potential new tax policy counts for. Not 2025 anyway, so I don't know why the Council on Foreign Relations is giving you any prediction or data for 2025, since I think even they know that, if the bill passes in 2025, it's not going to come into effect this year, since people have already earned half a year's worth of wages, all right? They're not going to change the tax policy mid-year. It'll be from 2026 onwards. So personally, I am optimistic that trade deals can be signed in 2025. We can get some clear direction, and a major tax cut that affects 2026 onward can be passed in 2025 as well. Maybe it's not no tax under 200K, maybe not even no tax under 150K, but perhaps raising the standard deduction to 50,000 for single filers, 100,000 for joint filers. Yeah, I think that is actually realistic for 2026 onwards. But what do you guys think? Leave your comments below, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.